And let's get right to the Texans coming off the 23-13 victory. What do you think about that? And then they're going to New Orleans. Boy, can you imagine if they were 3-0?
Oh, if they go 3-0, it's going to have a playoff atmosphere here in Houston. The team has never done that. The Houston Texans have never started 3-0. They've never been 3 games above 500. So that would be a nice little accomplishment. But that's all sounds good. You can't just talk about it and assume it's going to happen when you're going to the Superdome to take on Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. But going back a week, going back to Miami game, I was impressed. A lot of people call this an ugly win, and I don't know what an ugly win is in the NFL. When you go on the road and you beat a team that hung with the New England Patriots for the first half, put up 400 passing yards against the New England Patriots. I think this is a good win. This is the type of win that the Houston Texans needed. It wasn't like the Indianapolis Colts where the game was over in the first quarter. This was a game that they had to fight up until the fourth quarter to come away with a victory. And it is so hard. Trust me, it's so hard to win in the NFL when you could go and do it on the road. I don't care who you're playing. I believe this is the type of game that the Texans needed to have under their belt if they're going to be a playoff type team this year.
One of the things that got everybody, players were talking about it after the game, it was hot at Sun Life Stadium. Now the game time temperature was like 87, but the whole stadium was in the sun, and they always say at Reliant, if you're in the sun, it's like 10 degrees hotter. So they're looking at 97 degrees almost the entire game. And when they ran Ben Tate on those last 11 plays to eat up the clock, that to me was the most impressive thing they did in that game. Now, Ben Tate, could he be the third different running back to start this season?
Definitely. And when you ask that question, you're implying what are they going to do with Arian Foster. I think right now they learned from the mistake of bringing Arian Foster back too quickly. They're going to let him sit, in my guess. We don't know. They haven't said anything official, but I'll be very surprised if Arian Foster plays against the Saints. Ben Tate, he's answering the call. This is a guy since 1950. There's only been 11 rookies to start their first 2 games with 100 yards in each game, and he's one of those guys. Other guys among that list, Edgerrin James, Marshall Faulk, Earl Campbell. So that's a great group to be in, and Ben Tate now can say that he's one of those 11 guys, and I like what he's doing. He's adapting to the zone blocking system. They call it the one cut and go, and that's exactly what he's doing, and he's getting past the second level. He's breaking arm tackles. He's not playing like a guy who missed all of his rookie year with an injury. He's playing like a guy who could really, really master this zone blocking system and be one of the 1,000-yard rushers that you see in the zone blocking system.
One thing about Arian Foster, on the first series, he looked good. Then the more carries he got, the worse he looked. On his last 6 carries, he had 11 yards. So Gary Kubiak said, Foster said his hamstring felt tight. They thought he was fatigued because, like I said, it was hot. I remember Warren Sapp tweeted, he's not in football shape. He said, you can run all you want on another field, but until you get out there and get in football shape and the adrenaline starts pumping and you're getting hitting, you know what that's like. That is football shape. Now, I think if Derek Ward was in a boot, so there's a good chance he's not going to play. That means Steve Slayton would be the backup, and we're going to probably see more of Steve Slayton than we've seen in 2 years. You think he can still do it?
Oh, I definitely think he can do it. The issue with Steve Slayton, I believe it all had to do with his neck and his injury, and you talked about the nerve damage that he had in his hands. All that's been taken care of, but he hasn't had a chance to show people that he's healthy because Arian Foster has been playing great. Arian Foster, despite what credit I give to the offensive line, what credit I give to the zone blocking system, I believe Arian Foster, when healthy, is a great running back, and because of that, Steve Slayton hasn't had a chance. But I think this is why what we talked about last week with the smart decision, keeping Steve Slayton on the roster, this is why it was such a smart decision, because you can't have too much depth at the running back position. Steve Slayton goes from the 3rd or 4th running back now to probably number 2 if Derek Ward and Arian Foster aren't healthy for this New Orleans Saints game.
If that's the case, I think they may bring up Chris Ogbonnaya from the practice squad, their leading rusher in preseason. We're going to see a lot of backs. The Saints play 3. To me, Darren Sproles has been better than Reggie Bush ever was. And then they got Mark Ingram, the rookie, and Pierre Thomas. We're going to see a lot of backs running in and out. Now, I know one of the things you like so far is how many guys have stepped up at this early point in the season. Who do you like based on what they've done so far?
Oh, especially on the defense. When you talk about guys stepping up, last week people were talking about Mario having a big game, Antonio Smith with his crushing sacks, J.J. Watts. But in this game, there's 3 other guys that stood out in my mind. Glover Quinn, Brian Cushing had 10 tackles. He's starting to look like he's getting comfortable in that inside linebacker role. You know, there was just guys everywhere, and that's what I like. Good defenses have people step up. Connor Barwin is somebody everybody was waiting to see when's he going to get pressure on the quarterback. Well, he stepped up against Miami and had one of 2 sacks against the Miami Dolphins. So that's what you want to see when you have these guys come up. You want every week a different defensive player to step up, and that's what we're starting to see. And that's a sign of a very good defense when it's not just 1 or 2 guys making plays.
Now, I'm going to ask you a trick question, and you wouldn't have had to graduate from Rice to know the answer. Guess who leads the NFL in defense?
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say Houston Texans.
Good. Now, guess who leads the NFL in pass defense?
I'm going to go ahead and say Houston Texans.
And they were 30th and 32nd last year. And I know it's early. And they played against Kerry Collins. But like you mentioned, Chad Henne, 170 yards after 416 is very impressive. Now they go up against Drew Brees. But did you ever think we would say at any point this year Texans are number 1 in defense?
No, I expected them to improve with the addition of Jonathan Joseph, Danielle Manning, the draft of J.J. Watt. I've been bringing in Wade Phillips and Vance Joseph as your coaches. I expected them to improve, but to say that they're going to be number 1 after 2 weeks, I didn't see that coming. Now the question is, how long can they stay up there? How long can they stay in the top tier of the defense? If they could stay in the top 10 throughout the season, that would be a huge turnaround for this Houston Texans defense.
Now, speaking of turnarounds, the special teams last year, except for Neil Rackers, were terrible. Now they've been not just good, but great across the board. How do you turn it around that quick on special teams?
When you have a coach like Joe Marciano who lives and breathes special teams, they're going to turn around. They had a bad season last year. That's not something you expect out of a Joe Marciano coach special teams. This is one of the few special team coaches who's not really trying to springboard to a defensive coordinator or be like a John Harbaugh who went from special teams coach to the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. I think Joe Marciano is passionate about special teams. He's passionate about coaching these guys, these young guys who are trying to make it to the roster, but those are your mercenary guys, the ones who are running down kickoffs, blowing things up, who are blocking on kickoff return. He takes a special pride in working with those guys. So I don't expect, and I didn't expect, that special teams unit to be bad for years to come as long as Joe Marciano was leading them. And I like what I'm seeing. I like Brian Bramham. I like Brooks Reed running down there, making plays, making tackles. And this is one thing I like about Brooks Reed. He's a second-round pick. People are talking about him playing and maybe even possibly starting at the outside linebacker position. But if you talk to him, he's always talking about what he needs to do on special teams. He didn't let his high draft pick mess with his mind and have him thinking that he's above playing special teams. He's grasping it. He likes it. He wants to be a good special teams player until he gets the chance to start. And those are the type of guys you need running down on kickoffs.
They got a lot of unselfish guys who are high motor guys, and that's one reason they've improved. The most consistent player is their greatest player, and he did it again in Miami, and that's Andre Johnson. He had to spend $12,000 for 150 tickets, and he responded with 7 catches, 93 yards, including that big touchdown catch. I thought it was interesting that when Matt Schaub was getting bombarded in the third quarter, Kubiak said, we were going to be more aggressive in the passing game, and I told the coaches, we're going to get the ball to Andre Johnson, and they did. What does that say about him that he was still, even though they were focused on him, he got single covers? What does it say about him, the way he can consistently come through when defenses are supposed to be game planning for him?
You know what it says? It says he's a great player. He's an elite player. I know we use those superlatives a little bit too much, and we call everybody great, or we say this is a great play. But when you call Andre Johnson great or say that he's elite, you're not exaggerating at all, and you're absolutely right. Every week, every defensive coordinator, every defensive coach is saying we need to stop number 80. We need to focus on him. Either we need to double team him, or we need our safety help to be going towards number 80, towards Andre Johnson, and he comes up big, and it seems like at least once or twice a week, he's wide open. It's not just because of missed assignments or missed coverages. It's because he runs very good routes. He finds the open spots in the zone defense sometimes, and that's how he gets open. He's not just a great athlete, but he's a very smart player also.